Hello! Today I am coming to you live from Austin, Minnesota, the home of Hormel, the company that makes Spam, chili, ham, lots of different food products. And in fact, they have so many brands. It's quite astonishing how many things that they actually own and sell. So many of you are probably somebody that has eaten something like that. And I have to show you, I got a Spam gift bag. So if any of you enjoy Spam, this is definitely the place to be, but you can get it pretty much anywhere. And welcome everybody. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining. Really wonderful to see you all. And tonight we're going to be talking about what to do when someone interrupts you and how to deal with that. So as usual, I welcome your questions and feel free to drop those in the chat if you would like. But let's talk about one of the tips that I find to be most helpful. So when you do, let's say you're talking and someone interrupts you, the first thing that I would suggest is you certainly look their way, and you can smile or acknowledge them with a head nod, something like that. Hello, everybody who's joining us. And you do that and then say, give me just a second, I'm about to wrap up. Or, great thought, as soon as I finish, I'll give you the floor. Something like that. But the point here is a lot of times people interrupt us incessantly. And so that's another thing. You have to look at, okay, is this something that's a theme? In which case you definitely want to bring that up and say, hey, let's talk about this. Now, there's so many factors, right? We have to be aware, thinking about our judgment. Let's make sure that we have good discernment to know when is it appropriate to say something. You also don't want to come across like you're really upset in that moment, because a lot of times, especially when people are debating things or having a really good discussion about whatever it might be, people don't even realize sometimes that they're interrupting. Hey, Brian, great to see you. Interrupt my live anytime. That's awesome. So that's a really good example. Although, isn't it fun that I just have the floor right now? Like, you can't really vocally interrupt me unless I let you on here. But the thing is, an acknowledgement is so important because we always want to assume best intent. And that's the thing. The more that we can do that, I love that. Trust, surrender, breathe. Brian, that's awesome. And that's actually what I'm doing right now, because it is freezing here in Minnesota right now, as you can tell from the hood on my head. And tonight was such a great, by the way, just a quick side note. I'm here because I'm speaking tomorrow at Hormel's Women's Initiative in their stadium. So it's a very exciting opportunity to speak about how to make a powerful ask and also leadership presence. So there were 9 of us sitting around the table tonight talking about some of the things that are challenging, particularly for women. And a lot of times we do hesitate to speak up, particularly when somebody does interrupt us. So for some of us, it's harder to speak our ideas anyway, and then we've got someone that interrupts you and you feel like sometimes it can throw you off. And so to what Brian put in the chat, which I think is so great, is simply to breathe as one of the tips, to recognize that first so you don't react, that you respond in a way that you want to respond. Because that's the other thing sometimes I've seen is people will react, and react, when I say react, I mean in a way that isn't something that they want to be projected of themselves. So maybe let's say somebody interrupts them and they might respond back or retort back with a tone that they might not otherwise want it to have. Or maybe they have a snarky comment back or something like that. So of course, you always want to assume best intent, acknowledge that the comment was made, and most importantly, you're acknowledging the person. And then say, I'll be just a second here. Or if it's an appropriate interruption, maybe it's a time to say, hey, let me just table what I was going to say and let's let so-and-so interject here. But the point is that you are taking control, because too often what happens is, especially as women, we let someone interrupt us and we don't say anything. It becomes a theme, and then we become resentful and bitter, and we don't want to be that. we want to make sure that we're doing business and we're doing it well and we're doing it in a way that people feel like you are listening to them, and also that you're speaking with strength in your voice so that there's conviction there. One of the things that I've noticed, and thank you, Selma. Oh yeah, Margaret. I think it's Marguerite. My goodness, my eyes aren't very good. Sometimes you interrupt without realizing. That's a really, really important thing to keep in mind. And so, isn't it interesting how we as human beings make up these stories in our heads of what we think somebody meant by something when we find out later that wasn't it at all? Or worse, we make up a story and we never check out to see if it's true. And perhaps there's another story to the story that we might not have even realized. And I think that's a really good reminder, Marguerite, about the idea that, sometimes we just don't even realize it, or we're really passionate about something. And so when we're passionate, sometimes it's harder for us to really be aware of how we're coming across. So there's a lot of different reasons why these things can happen. The key is to make sure that, again, you acknowledge. Perhaps that's a time to empathize. There's actually something called the empathy bridge, where you empathize with someone and then you move the conversation along. So it might sound something like, now next part has to be true. Hey, that's a great idea, so-and-so. Or I love your passion around this topic. And let's get back to this part of the discussion. Or I'd like to continue with my thought and then I'll turn the floor over to you. So the key is, especially if you want to come across with confidence and credibility, is to make sure that you are acknowledging and moving that conversation forward. Because frankly, this is really important with being a good facilitator. Because if you're a good facilitator, you're taking control of the conversation and you're not letting the conversation or someone else control you. You want to make sure that you are staying in control and you're moving things along so people also will look at you as more credible. Because we want to, of course, come across in the best way possible. Now, the thing that might surprise you about what I'm going to say next is that sometimes we might not even realize what we're doing in a way that almost allows people to interrupt us. So let me say what I mean by that. Let's say you're starting a meeting and you start it hesitantly. You say lots of filler words and you're softer spoken. Maybe you are speaking fairly slowly, or you're halting in your speech and you can't quite get the words out. If we start a meeting like that, or if we start speaking like that, you know what other people are going to think? Oh, wow, this person is not a leader. I'm going to interrupt because I think that she needs me to interrupt. Or I'm going to interrupt because this conversation needs to go somewhere, and right now it is not going anywhere. So keep in mind that if somebody interrupts you, it's possible that it's because of you and how you come across. Now, I'm certainly saying there's many of other reasons why people interrupt us, but that is something to think about. So instead, if you start that meeting with a strong voice, so strong conviction in your voice, you speak with confidence, and you smile so you've got a friendly expression to your voice, to your face. When you have that and in your voice, it shows that you know where you're going, that you're taking them somewhere, because people will trust you more and they're going to think you're more credible if they know that you are taking them somewhere. And that simply means taking them somewhere in the conversation. It's the whole concept of even that fake it till you make it, or act as if, that a lot of times the way people speak, in fact, it's a huge component, the way people speak makes us as listeners decide whether we want to keep listening to them or not, or even if we trust them or not. So lots of things happen in these moments of truth, as one of my colleagues calls them, that everything we do is another moment of truth, that people are gathering evidence either for or against something, or maybe it's just a neutral experience. But really being mindful to speak with confidence in your voice, and that's specifically one thing to do, is to make sure that you speak with a declarative tone, not an upspeak tone with a question mark. If you're saying a statement, you want it to have a period on the end, not a question mark. A question mark? Imagine if I was speaking like this the whole time. You would start wondering, does she really know what she's talking about? Because simply in the voice, it can make a huge difference. So that's what I would suggest. Absolutely shifting. And thank you, Selma, about responding and reacting. Good advice. That's a thank you. I think about one of my clients who said she had a tendency. She was an interrupter, but not because she was trying to be rude or anything, but she would get really excited about answering, really passionate about responding to things. And she said that she found what was happening is the more she would do that, she wasn't giving other people a chance to speak. And she was the leader of the team. So we created a mantra for her that she still uses today, and it's called stop, pause, breathe. With those three things, she said that's what she has as a mantra now that she says every time she's wanting to speak. She says stop, pause, breathe to herself, of course. And that helps her to remain more controlled and then decide, is this really something that I should be responding to? Or should I let someone on my team respond? So lots of different techniques that can be helpful for sure. And on that note, I'm going to wrap us up here, folks. But thank you so much for those of you that joined. Again, as a reminder, when somebody interrupts you, make sure you acknowledge that and move the conversation along by saying, I'm going to wrap up here in just a moment, and then I'll be happy to turn the floor over to you. Oh, I like that, Selma. People also worry about forgetting what they want to say, so they interrupt. Yes, that is another thing. So very important to keep in mind, is this, well, first of all, if you're the one that might be concerned about interrupting, write that down. Have a notepad. Jot down what you want to say. And then I do think that it's good to ask yourself, is this really something that's going to add value to the conversation? Or should I wait and bring it up one-on-one? Or is it a time to interject? There's lots of options for sure. And a big part of all of this is having good judgment. Knowing, and it's all stems back to emotional intelligence, being aware of yourself and then being aware of others. Are you in a situation where you're noticing how you're coming across, but also how you're affecting others and what matters to the audience? And it does remind me of two questions that I love to ask, especially in a situation that's a little uncomfortable or you're not sure what to do. The two questions that I would say to think about is, number one, what is needed here? And number two, what is required of me? When you do that, those can be really helpful tips to help you get a better sense of just taking that pause and going, what do I really need to do in this situation? And what is important here right now in this moment. And in this moment, I am going to wrap up and say thank you so much for being here, folks. I really appreciate you coming and contributing. Thank you for those that commented in the chat. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you, Selma. And if there's anybody else I missed, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you here next week at the same time. Have a great evening, everybody.